This morning we will hear and participate in the Word of God in a responsive way. We will hear of Jesus traveling through the wilderness and being tempted by the devil. This interpretation comes from the Message Bible. This comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Next, Jesus was taken into the wild by the Spirit for the test, and the devil was ready to give it. Jesus prepared for the test by fasting 40 days and 40 nights. That left him, of course, in a state of extreme hunger. And the devil took advantage of this in the first test. Since you are God's son, speak the word that will turn these stones into loaves of bread. For the second test, the devil took him to the holy city. He sat him on top of the temple and said, "Since you are God's son, jump." The devil goaded him by quoting Psalm 91. He has placed you in the care of angels. They will catch you so you won't so much as stub your toe on a stone. For the third test, the devil took him to the peak of a huge mountain, and he gestured expansively, pointing out all the earth's kingdoms, how glorious they all were. And then he said, "They're yours, lock, stock, and barrel. Just go down on your knees and worship me, and they're yours." The test was over, and the devil left, and in his place angels. And angels came and took care of Jesus' needs. May God bless our hearing and our understanding of these sacred words. I'm sure I'm not the only one among us who has a hard time resisting temptation. You know, I can easily give up and choose the chocolate cake in this case. Easily, because I've already given up other things that were far more difficult to give up. I quit smoking, and I haven't had a drink for over 27 years. But still, I'll choose that chocolate cake in this picture. Even though giving up chocolate cake would be literally a piece of cake compared to the other temptations. I could easily live without chocolate cake. In fact, I'd probably be a little bit better off without it. Not having chocolate cake would not be an existential threat to me. And you know, I'm sure that as we reflect even on just the last week in our lives, there are times when we've given into temptation. I know I have. We still succumb, even though we know we could do without it. Even though during the period of Lent, we're told that we should at least give up one thing to try to emulate the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. And yet, we still succumb to temptation. And giving up chocolate cake is not at all the kind of temptation that Jesus was faced with as he traveled through the wilderness. Those temptations were of grave circumstances and consequences for him. Those temptations went to the very core of who Jesus is. It allowed him to learn just who he was and allows us to learn from him learning that. These were things that were not only life-threatening, but threatening to his sense of who he was as God's son. Yeah, to go 40 days and 40 nights without food or water is life-threatening. I can't barely make it to noon without getting hangry. In fact, the stories are of some of the worst little tiffs between, in my marital relationship have been as a result of me being hangry. I can't imagine what it would be like to go 40 days without food. It would feel like my insides were just eating away at me. I would almost eat anything to stay alive. In fact, there are story after story of people who have been faced with that kind of hunger in their lives who do eat anything just to have something in their stomach. I can't imagine that kind of hunger. But Jesus was in just that kind of a dire strait when Satan, that old trickster, offers up his first temptation to him. Oh, just turn those stones into loaves of bread. Such an easy thing for Jesus if he was truly the Son of God, right? Pretty easy answer for that unbelievable hunger that he must have been experiencing. And yet, Jesus responds, even though his insides must have been eating away at him, saying, no. It's the word of God that keeps me alive. The word of God was literally his food. The physical need for nourishment would perhaps be the easiest temptation for Jesus to rebuff, though, even if he was in that dire strait of 40 days of hunger. And then the devil takes Jesus to the highest place in the temple, looking out over the whole city. Down below him were all those other folks, the rabbis and the priests and so forth. And he says to Jesus, appealing to his sense of ego, if you're really the Son of God, just jump. If you are who you say you are, just jump. And the angels will take care of you, and they won't even let you stub your toe. But once again, Jesus quotes the word of God in the Hebrew text by saying, don't put the Lord your God to the test. Finally, the last temptation. Jesus is taken by the trickster up to the mountaintop. And he says, look at all of the kingdoms of the world before you and all their glory. And if you just worship me, I'll make you ruler of them all. Satan tests Jesus with that opportunity for the ultimate power. Kingdom over all of humanity. If you would just worship Satan. But Jesus firmly rejects this final temptation. I love the way it's put in the Message Bible. Jesus says, beat it. Beat it, Satan. Worship the Lord your God and only him. Serve him with absolute single-mindedness. So Jesus has rejected all three of Satan's temptation. The temptation of the easy answer, turning stones into bread. That's probably my biggest temptation at all. I'm sort of a lazy guy, and I'll always opt for the easy way to do things. I'll just get it done, so to speak. Jesus rejects the temptation of ego. I'm higher and above all those other people. I'm right and you're wrong. My wife often tells me that I've been born with the Heinz need to be right gene. And she's right. I've had to learn how to resist that temptation. And finally, Jesus rejects the temptation of power. The temptation of power. Oh boy, we can see that temptation playing out in our world in oh so many terrible ways right now. Just to have a little bit more power. But Jesus rejects all three of those. The easy answer, the ego, the power. And by doing that, and in his rejection, he says, I'm going to put God first. I'm going to put God last in my life. I'm going to put God first and last, always in my life. And for those of us who follow in Jesus' path, that's our challenge as well. We are challenged that in every situation in life, as we travel through whatever wilderness we have to travel through, individually and together. And we're faced with all of these kinds of temptations. You know, the easy answer and the temptation to ego and the allure of power. We all get tempted by those things, but we are called by God to put God first, to put God last in all of our living, regardless. This is what Jesus accomplished in the wilderness. This is the challenge he places before us. But it's important to remember that Jesus' story does not end in the wilderness. Indeed, in rejecting Satan's temptation, Jesus emerges out of the wilderness into a ministry of love. A ministry that feeds the hungry. A ministry of caring and healing for the sick and lonely. A ministry of giving new eyesight to the blind. And in the end, new life to anyone who knows him. Jesus emerged out of that wilderness so that he could live a life of selfless, giving, transformative, fearless love. A love put into action. So Jesus sets forth the ultimate example for all of us. As we travel through and emerge out of our own personal wildernesses, to resist all those temptations that keep us from a life where we put God first and last in all we do. Let us live a life of love. Amen.